Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be doing a review of Ablutions by Patrick DeWitt. Before I kick off my review, this is actually going to be the first video that I've filmed in quite a while. I mentioned in one of my previous videos that I was traveling to the US, which I did. I had an amazing time, but I unfortunately also got very sick. When I was in the US, I actually got coronavirus and I got it very badly. And I am now back in the UK. You'll be able to see I'm in my familiar setting, but I am unfortunately still suffering from the after effects of having COVID. You can probably tell my voice sounds a little bit different to how it normally sounds, but you'll just have to bear with me as I recover through this period. The last two and a half weeks have been absolutely brutal. I've had a great support network around me. We're going to try filming a video, see how we go. And without further ado, let's jump right in. So recently I read Ablutions by Patrick DeWitt. I read another one of Patrick DeWitt's books, The Sisters Brothers, and I absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 stars, a very easy 5 stars. And Ablutions is actually DeWitt's debut. And I have to say I was really impressed with it as a debut and I really enjoyed the deeper themes that it was covering. It's very dark, it's very grim, it's very unforgiving, and I do really believe that you have to be in a certain place in your life to be able to read this book and get what, I think you can get out of it. But it's kind of hard to know when you're kind of ready for that, I guess. Weirdly, it was the right time for me. The book talks a lot about why we do things and why we stick with things that we don't like doing and ultimately make us unhappy. And I am definitely one of those people, and this has upsides and downsides to it. I like to see things through. I am one of those people that if I commit to something, I want to see it through to the end. Sometimes I do that at the cost of my own happiness and the cost of my own sanity sometimes. And so this book is a look at that, a look into one's psyche and why we make the decisions that we make. And I just think it's a really interesting take on that. And that's actually probably my favorite thing about this book, is that it is very thematic. And even though there's a lot going on, everything that's going on with the wide cast of characters that you meet relates to this point, which is why do we do the things that we do? And how can we get ourselves out of this rut that we call life sometimes? And I think DeWitt's ability to create this wide cast of characters is one of my other favorite things about this book, is that we meet a lot of different characters at different points in their life. Some come back later on in the book, some kind of disappear, and you kind of make assumptions about where they've gone or what has happened to them. And I think it's just a really interesting take on the human experience and how certain people will come into your life, you will remember them for certain reasons, and how other people will just kind of fly by in the night. You'll remember them in that moment, but then when they leave your life, they don't really leave any impression whatsoever. And I find that concept really interesting. The other thing that I really liked is I love the way that the story is told. So the story is told as though you are the narrator, and as the narrator, you work at this bar. And it essentially tells the story from when you're already working at this bar to meeting all of these very wide variety of characters. And then it does a really great job of kind of bringing it full circle at the end. I don't want to go into too much detail because I really don't want to spoil it, and I really think you should just go and read it. It's a very short book, so you're not going to have to commit yourself for too long to have to read this book. But the way that it's told is really interesting because it is told as though you are the narrator. The book addresses you as though you are the bartender. I think that's really cool because it puts you in the position of the bartender. And so when I was thinking about certain things, or when certain themes came up in the story, I was thinking about it as me rather than as the bartender, if that makes sense, which I really liked. And I was very surprised that the story was told in that way. I'm sure there is a literary term for that. I just don't know what it is. The other thing that I think is really impressive is how DeWitt is able to bring all of these characters and these threads together at the end, and then ultimately how that impacts the narrator. I think this is the thing that I find so impressive about the fact that this is a debut, is that he was able to weave all of these character lines together and not make it feel convoluted and not make it feel like there's a lot going on, if that makes sense, even though there is a lot going on. The things that might not gel with other people, and I think, again, this is just kind of what your personal preference is when you read, but there is quite a lot of trigger warnings, and I did mention at the start, it is very dark and gritty and very unforgiving, and that is not for everyone, and I totally understand why that isn't. But there's references to drugs, there's references to alcohol abuse, there's discussion about sex, violence, animal abuse at one point, there is self-harm, there is talk about suicide as well, and I just think that if you are sensitive to any of those things whatsoever, it's probably not going to be the book for you, because like I said, it's very grim. I think depending on where you are in your life as well, I think this book will impact you in different ways. I think if you're somebody who is going through substance abuse or alcohol abuse, this is the sort of book that I think could trigger you, because it is, I mean, it's tackling some very heavy themes, right? And I think you have to be aware of that going in. If you are someone who is coming off the tail end of that sort of lived experience, then again, it might also act as a trigger. So I do really want to just reflag that I do think you have to be in the right frame of mind for this book. You have tackled with this in the past, or you're tackling with this right now, then I would maybe leave it for later on, because otherwise it's going to not only impact your experience reading it, but it might actually impact your current lived experience, and I would not want that to happen. I think that also brings me on to this broader question of who is this book for? Is it for people who are going through this? Is it more of a cautionary tale? Is it for people who have never gone through this? I personally have never gone through any substance or alcohol abuse, but I did find it a really interesting story, specifically relating to whether the things that I do on a daily basis actually make me happy, which is what a lot of this book is about. And I think for that reason, even though I don't have those lived experiences, I have some of the other experiences that this character has, or the narrator has. And so take what I've said in this clip, read more about it if you're curious to hear more about the trigger warnings. But I do think it's just generally one of those books that will impact you more, I think, when you're maybe psychologically and emotionally ready for it. It's hard to know when you're psychologically and emotionally ready for anything, but take what you can get from this review and kind of make your own judgment. The other thing that I think might not work for some people, and to be honest, this is the only reason why I didn't give it a 5 stars, is that the pacing is a little off in certain places. I think it starts off really strong, and then it kind of has these little ups and downs where I think the pacing is just a little bit off. I feel like the cast of characters is maybe a little bit too wide. I don't think we needed that many characters. I actually think the amount of characters that we had in the Sisters Brothers was perfect. We have like 5 or 6 characters that we come across. They all have their own stories, and I think it's really well done. I think in this one we have like over 10, if I remember correctly. And while I love having a wide array of characters that we meet, I just feel like it was maybe too many. And I think even just cutting it in half would have drastically improved that, and we could have got to know each character a little bit deeper. It's a minor thing. It's not a deal breaker by any means, and I don't think it's a huge issue. And he's definitely improved on that in the Sisters Brothers. That's why Sisters Brothers was an easy 5 stars for me. But I ended up landing on a 4.25 for this book, which I think is really strong for a debut. All of the stuff that I loved about the Sisters Brothers, you can start to see the beginnings of that in this book. And I think DeWitt is becoming a favorite author of mine. I think he's really excellent at writing about the human experience in a really relatable way, whilst covering some really heavy topics, doing it in a way that is very sensitive to the topic as well. It never feels crass. It never feels like he's doing it for shock value. It feels real, it feels raw, and it feels incredibly relatable. So for that reason, I strongly recommend this book. Let me know if you've read it. I've not come across anyone who's read this book, so I'm super curious if anybody has actually read this book, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it too, because it seems to be quite divisive, like when I was looking on it online after I finished reading it. So I'm very curious to hear other people's perspective on it too. I'm gonna leave it there. We managed to get through this review in one piece, and I didn't forget anything, which is a start. Thank you for watching, everyone. Glad to be back, and I'm glad to be filming again, slowly but surely. And I will see you in my next video. Stay safe, please stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.